The courtroom wasn't ready for Meri Brown. Not really. The murmurs faded when she walked in. Folder in hand, the weight of its contents invisible to the eye but crushing in the atmosphere. She wasn't here for theatrics. She wasn't here to play along with the scripts that had been written for years behind closed doors. She was here with evidence. DNA evidence. Evidence that would shake the foundations of a family, and one man in particular, Kody Brown. Meri's heels clicked softly on the marble floor, each step measured, deliberate. She carried a thin blue folder, edges crisp, almost clinical in their appearance. Nothing about her said weakness. Her hair was pulled back tightly, her suit neutral, professional, almost austere. But the silence that followed her wasn't about her appearance. It was about anticipation. The kind that presses on the chest and leaves your heart caught in your throat. Kody sat at the defense table, stiff, eyes darting, his fingers drumming nervously against the wood. He had heard rumors, whispers online, speculation among fans, even the occasional reporter's question. But nothing, not the whispers, not the speculations, had prepared him for the folder Meri now held. The judge's gavel rested in front of him. It might have commanded attention before, but today it seemed powerless. Today, the tension had its own gravity. Meri didn't look at Kody. She didn't look at anyone in particular. She simply moved forward and placed the folder on the center of the bench, in full view of the judge, the attorneys, and the gallery. The room collectively held its breath. "This court will now reconvene for this hearing," the judge began, but his voice lacked its usual authority. It wavered slightly, almost as if he sensed that what came next wasn't procedural. It was personal. Kody's attorney half rose, attempting to object. "Your Honor, we were not." Meri's voice cut through the courtroom like a blade. "This evidence is pertinent. It must be entered into the record." A hush fell over the room. Even the bailiff leaned forward, interest piqued. Kody's jaw tightened. His eyes flicked to Meri, then to the folder, and back again. This was the folder he had feared, the one that could undo years of narrative control, decades of image management, the careful construction of a life under scrutiny. Meri sat alone. Not with her attorney, not next to anyone who might shield her from the inevitable confrontation. Alone, centered. Commanding without speaking, the judge cleared his throat. "Mrs. Brown, you are entering new evidence." "Yes, Your Honor," she said, calm, precise, cold, but never lacking in authority. "DNA evidence." The gallery stiffened. Murmurs whispered from the back rows. A reporter's pen froze mid-stroke. The attorneys exchanged nervous glances. Kody leaned back slightly, his expression faltering for the first time all day. Meri's hand rested lightly on the folder. "This evidence will show the truth," she said, "and the truth cannot be denied." The judge nodded slowly, understanding the weight of the moment. He opened the folder page by page as the room collectively leaned in. Each turn of the paper was a drumbeat, each word a hammer striking against a wall of lies that had been carefully constructed over the years. Even from the back of the courtroom, you could feel it. The shift. The air itself seemed heavier, thick with tension, anticipation, dread. Robin's eyes widened. Kody's hands trembled ever so slightly. The weight of the truth was not subtle, and Meri sat, composed, unflinching, as the first whispers of the evidence began to echo through the courtroom. The courtroom felt suspended in time. Every heartbeat, every shuffle of paper, every breath seemed amplified. Kody sat frozen, staring at the folder as though it might vanish if he didn't confront it. Robin's lips parted slightly, her eyes flicking between Meri and Kody, trying to grasp what was unfolding but too afraid to breathe too loudly. Meri's voice broke the silence again, precise and measured. This DNA evidence was collected, tested, and verified under full chain of custody protocols. The lab is accredited. There is no question of authenticity. A faint murmur ran through the gallery. The words hung in the air like smoke, thick and suffocating. Kody's attorney opened his mouth to protest, but even he paused. Something in the courtroom had shifted. The usual defenses, the procedural objections, the legal loopholes, felt small against the weight of undeniable truth. Kody's eyes flickered to his hands, clenched into tight fists under the table. The color drained from his face. Every plan, every carefully constructed narrative, Every whispered lie he had relied upon now seemed brittle, fragile, and exposed. The judge flipped through the first pages of the folder with deliberate care. Each page was a countdown to revelation, a slow march toward the truth that no one in the room could ignore. Mrs. Brown, the judge said slowly. According to these documents, a DNA test was performed 6 months ago. Is that correct? Yes, Your Honor, Meri replied, calm, unwavering. And who requested this test? The judge asked. His eyes briefly flicked to Cody, who froze mid-breath. I did, Meri said. Her voice was steady, precise. I needed to know the truth. A shiver passed through the room. Robin gasped softly, covering her mouth. Christine leaned forward in her seat, disbelief written across her face. Janelle's hands were clasped tightly in her lap, knuckles white. Even the reporters paused, pens hovering above paper. Cody's lips trembled as he stood abruptly. This is outrageous, he shouted. She's attempting to. This is about money, about control, not the child. The judge's gavel came down with a sharp crack. Silence fell like a heavy curtain. Cody froze mid-step, his voice caught in his throat. Meri's gaze lifted, steady and unflinching. This test, she said, confirms the truth. It proves who has been lying all along. The child in question is mine. The words rippled through the courtroom like an electric current. Robin's hand flew to her mouth. Cody's face turned pale, almost ghostly. Christine whispered under her breath. No, this can't be. Even the judge seemed momentarily taken aback, his gavel poised but unstruck. The court will recess briefly to examine these documents further, he said. Voice measured, yet subdued. Meri remained seated, hands folded on the table, eyes fixed forward. She didn't flinch, she didn't fumble, she didn't need to. The truth had arrived, and it was unyielding. As the judge's chambers closed and the room waited in tense anticipation, the reality settled over everyone present. This wasn't about fame or contracts or public perception. This was about lies that had been hidden for over a decade, lies that Cody had maintained, controlled, and manipulated. And now, the foundations were cracking. The room remained still. Even the air seemed to pause, heavy and expectant. Meri's eyes never left the folder. She had waited years for this moment. And now it was here. The court, the family, and the world could witness the reckoning. The courtroom remained suspended, a heavy stillness pressing down on every person present. Even the faint creak of leather chairs sounded like a shout in the charged silence. Cody's body was rigid, every muscle taut, his fingers trembling, despite his best effort to appear composed. Robin sat frozen, eyes wide, every breath shallow. Meri's hand rested lightly on the folder, the weight of it unspoken but undeniable. She didn't glance at Cody. She didn't need to. The folder itself carried the authority that he had tried to wield for years. She leaned forward slightly, her voice quiet but piercing. This evidence is not about money. It is not about revenge. It is about the truth, and the truth has consequences. A reporter in the back row scribbled furiously, but even her pen seemed hesitant under the gravity of the room. The gallery whispered in hushed tones. Even the bailiff's usual composure had faltered, his eyes flicking back and forth like a man trying to gauge the unfolding storm. The judge leaned back in his chair, eyebrows knitted tightly. Mrs. Brown, this DNA evidence, this document confirms maternal identity. Correct? Yes, Your Honor, Meri replied. Her voice did not waver. It confirms what has been hidden for over a decade. The child in question, he is mine. A collective gasp swept through the courtroom. Robin's lips parted, shock evident across her face. Cody's jaw went slack for a fraction of a second, and then his hands gripped the table, knuckles white. He tried to rise, to protest, to assert control, but the words caught in his throat. The judge's voice cut through the room, measured, deliberate, yet softer than before. And who submitted this test, Mrs. Brown? I did, Meri said. Her eyes met the judge's, unwavering, steady. I requested it to confirm a truth that had been obscured, manipulated, and hidden from everyone who deserved to know it. The room seemed to exhale as one, though no one dared speak. Cody's attorney opened his mouth to interject, but even he paused, recognizing the unassailable weight of fact resting in the folder. Robin's hand shook as she brought it to her mouth. No, that can't be, she whispered. Christine leaned closer to Janelle, both women wide-eyed, straining to hear every syllable, to catch every nuance of the unfolding revelation. Cody finally found his voice trembling, desperate. "She can't. This isn't right. This isn't about the child. She's trying to. This is about tearing the family apart." The judge's gavel came down sharply, echoing like a gunshot. Silence slammed over the courtroom, heavy and final. Cody froze mid-word, a man suddenly aware that every defense he had prepared, every lie he had maintained, was unraveling in real time. Meri leaned back slightly, composed, her presence unyielding. "This is about the truth," she repeated, her voice calm but cutting, "and it cannot be denied." The judge flipped a page in the folder carefully, scanning the documents with deliberate slowness, as if each turn of the page revealed not just evidence, but the long-hidden fractures in a family carefully curated for public display. Every eye in the room followed him, each breath held in collective anticipation. The gallery whispered, reporters froze, and even the bailiff leaned in slightly. Meri remained still, a calm center in the storm. She had waited for this moment for years, and now the moment had arrived. The room knew it, the family knew it, Cody knew it, and there was no escaping it. It wasn't just evidence in a folder, it wasn't just a test result, it was the revelation of truth itself. Unshakable, undeniable, and destined to change everything. The courtroom hung on every word. Every set of eyes seemed glued to the folder in front of Meri. The folder that had become more than just paper. It was the embodiment of years of truth suppressed and silence endured. Cody's hands trembled as he gripped the edge of the table. His usual poise, the calculated control he had exercised for so long, was slipping away with every passing second. Robin's eyes darted nervously between him and Meri, as though searching for some explanation that could make this impossible reality believable. The judge cleared his throat. "Mrs. Brown, you've submitted this DNA evidence to this court. Are there any additional documents or corroborating evidence you wish to present at this time?" Meri's gaze shifted slightly, just enough to catch the eye of the bailiff beside her. She produced a second folder from her bag, older and heavier than the first. Its leather edges were worn from years of careful preservation. She placed it on the table deliberately, letting its weight speak before her words did. "This folder," she began, voice calm but deliberate, "contains documentation, correspondence, and legal records that trace the manipulation, concealment, and false narratives that have been perpetuated for over a decade." A collective intake of breath swept through the room. Cody's jaw tightened, his face pale, sweat forming at his temples. Robin's hand went to her mouth, fingers trembling. Christine leaned forward in her seat, eyes wide and unblinking. Janelle's knuckles were white as she gripped the edge of the chair. The judge's eyes narrowed as he leaned forward, scanning the documents carefully. Each page he turned seemed to echo through the courtroom, each flip a drumbeat marking the unspooling of deception. Meri's voice cut through the tension. "Your Honor, this is not just about DNA, it is about truth, about accountability, and about restoring what was taken from me. The custody, the acknowledgement, the years erased by falsehoods." Cody rose abruptly, the heat of panic flushing his face. "This is outrageous. These claims, these documents, they're not valid. You can't just—" The judge slammed his gavel down, sharp and final. Silence fell like a stone wall. Cody froze mid-sentence, his anger momentarily choked by the overwhelming gravity of the evidence laid before him. "Mr. Brown," the judge said, voice steady and controlled, "I will hear no interruptions. This court is here to examine the facts presented. You will remain seated and silent until directed otherwise." Meri leaned slightly forward, letting her eyes sweep the room. She did not look at Cody, she didn't need to. The weight of her words, her evidence, and the long-suppressed truth had done its work. The room shifted, the air itself thickened, and every individual present sensed the shift from tension to reckoning. Robin's lips trembled. This can't be happening," she whispered, barely audible, a mixture of shock and fear coloring her tone. Cody's attorney opened his mouth again, hesitant, but even he faltered under the weight of the unfolding evidence. The first folder had revealed the DNA truth, and now this second folder was beginning to expose the network of lies, forgeries, and manipulations that had been hidden for years. Meri's hand rested on the second folder, fingers lightly tracing the worn leather. "The evidence within," she said softly, "documents everything, every falsified signature, every misleading statement, every manipulated record. This is not conjecture. This is fact." The judge leaned back, eyes narrowing as he absorbed the enormity of the situation. He looked first at Meri, then at Cody, then back at the documents. "Mrs. Brown," he said, voice deliberate, "you are presenting evidence of a serious nature: fraud, misrepresentation, parental manipulation. Is that correct?" "Yes, Your Honor," Meri said, unwavering, "and I have the documentation to prove each claim." The courtroom seemed to collectively hold its breath. Cody's face was pale, beads of sweat forming on his forehead. Robin's hands were clutched to her chest, fear and disbelief etched across her face. Even the gallery reporters and onlookers alike sat in tense silence, sensing that what was happening was more than a legal proceeding. It was a revelation that would reshape everything they thought they knew. Meri remained calm, centered, composed. The storm had begun, and she had set it into motion with nothing but the truth, the evidence, and her unwavering resolve. The courtroom was suffused with an almost tangible tension, the kind that made even the walls seem to lean in closer, straining to catch every syllable. Every pair of eyes followed the second folder, the one Meri had placed deliberately on the table. It wasn't just a folder. It was a key, a compass pointing to the truth that had been buried for years. Cody shifted uneasily in his seat, his fingers tapping a nervous rhythm against the polished wood. Robin's mouth opened and closed, as if she were struggling to find words that would make sense of the chaos unfolding before her. The gallery murmured softly, but no one dared speak above a whisper. Even the court reporters typed slower, as though the gravity of the moment demanded precision over speed. Meri opened the folder slowly, deliberately revealing the first page of documents. Legal correspondence, email chains, notarized forms, and official records lay before the judge like a roadmap to the concealed truths. "Your Honor," she said calmly, voice clear and unwavering, "these documents establish a chain of custody and demonstrate that falsification occurred under deliberate direction." The judge leaned forward, his eyes scanning the page, then raising his gaze to Cody. "Mr. Brown," he said, voice low but authoritative, "are you aware of these documents?" Cody's jaw tightened. He opened his mouth, closed it, and then sat back, his posture defensive. I don't know what she's presenting," he stammered, voice wavering. This can't silence," the judge interrupted sharply, banging the gavel once. The sound reverberated through the room, cutting through the chaos like a whip. "You will remain silent while this evidence is examined." Meri's eyes scanned the courtroom, briefly meeting Robin's. There was no anger in her gaze, only the weight of truth. "This folder contains records of every action taken to conceal the truth from me," she continued, voice steady. "Signatures altered, records manipulated, statements fabricated. This is not speculation. This is verifiable evidence." Robin's hands trembled as she reached for her purse, fingers clutching it tightly. Christine leaned forward, hand covering her mouth, eyes wide with shock. Janelle's knuckles whitened as she gripped the edge of her chair. The room was alive with tension, the air thick with anticipation. The judge lifted a page and held it up for everyone to see. "This document," he said, voice deliberate, "is a notarized custody transfer form. The signature here, listed as Mr. Brown's, appears inconsistent with verified examples." "Are you claiming forgery, Mrs. Brown?" "Yes, Your Honor," Meri replied calmly. "This signature was coerced, altered, and falsified to conceal my parental rights. Every document here proves that I was systematically erased." Cody's face paled, his fingers gripping the table as he struggled to maintain composure. "That's not true. I didn't." "This isn't." The judge slammed the gavel down, sharp and final. Silence swept the room. Cody froze mid-sentence, every argument evaporating in the presence of indisputable evidence. Meri leaned forward slightly, her hand resting lightly on the folder. "This isn't about anger or revenge," she said, voice calm but cutting. "It's about truth. The child, the trust, the documents, everything that was hidden has now been revealed. And now, this court must act on the evidence." The gallery stirred, the weight of the revelation settling in. Reporters exchanged shocked glances, typing furiously, capturing every detail of the courtroom drama. Robin sat back, her face pale, unable to reconcile the truth with the version of events she had maintained for years. Cody's attorney finally spoke, his voice tight with tension. "Your Honor, we request a recess to review the documents before further proceedings." "No," the judge said firmly, cutting him off. "This court will proceed. The evidence is in front of us. The truth cannot wait." Meri's gaze returned to Cody, steady, unwavering. The silence between them was electric, heavy with unspoken years of manipulation, fear, and suppression. Every heartbeat in the room seemed amplified, every breath weighed with anticipation. The judge's eyes moved back to the folder. "Mrs. Brown," he said slowly, deliberately, "the evidence presented here points to serious allegations, forgery, misrepresentation, and deliberate concealment of parental rights. Are you prepared to testify to these claims?" "Yes, Your Honor," Meri said simply. "I have waited years for this moment. I am ready." The room exhaled collectively, though no one dared to speak. The tension had reached a breaking point. The long-hidden truths, the buried lies, and the carefully constructed deceptions had all converged in this moment, and nothing in the courtroom would ever be the same. The courtroom was still, yet it vibrated with an almost imperceptible tension, as if every soul inside could sense the walls themselves holding their breath. Cody sat frozen, the color drained from his face. Each page Meri slid across the table seemed to strip him of composure piece by piece. Meri's eyes never left the judge, her voice calm but razor-sharp. "Your Honor, this document shows the notarized consent forms for parental custody that were signed under duress," she said. "The signatures of both myself and Mr. Brown were manipulated. My rights were intentionally erased from the records." The judge leaned forward, peering over his glasses at Cody. "Mr. Brown, are you denying these allegations?" Cody's throat moved, but no sound emerged. He swallowed, fingers clenching the edge of the table so tightly that the knuckles whitened. You will remain silent," the judge said, firm and final. "This is not the time for evasion. Mrs. Brown's evidence is now part of the official record, and the court must proceed." Meri turned slightly, allowing her gaze to sweep over the gallery. The room was taut with attention, reporters scribbling notes, attorneys whispering quietly, and Robin's hand covering her mouth as her eyes darted between Cody and Meri. Christine and Janelle leaned forward in unison, caught in the gravity of the unfolding revelation. "This isn't just about documents," Meri continued, voice even, measured. "It's about the timeline, the intentional misrepresentation, and the concealment of a child from me for over a decade. Each record, each alteration, corroborates the truth I present today." The judge flipped to a page detailing a custody transfer form, the signature clearly altered. "Mr. Brown," he said, holding the page before him, "this signature appears inconsistent with prior verified examples. Can you explain this?" Cody's hands shook slightly, and he leaned forward, voice cracking. "It wasn't like that. It was. We were, it's not." "Ina," the judge interrupted, slamming the gavel with authority. The echo ricocheted through the room, silencing even the whispers in the back rows. Cody's protest died mid-sentence, leaving only the weight of undeniable evidence before him. Meri's eyes briefly met Robin's, though not with hostility, only quiet resolution. "This is not about punishment," she said, "nor revenge. This is the acknowledgement of truth. For the child, for the family, for the records themselves. For years, these truths were buried. Today, they must be revealed." The gallery seemed to lean forward in collective anticipation, the air almost waiting for the next word. Cody's attorney cleared his throat nervously, but the judge held up a hand, dismissing him without comment. "Mrs. Brown," he said, eyes locked on hers, "have you verified each piece of evidence? Every document, every signature, every chain of custody?" "Yes, Your Honor," Meri replied, unwavering. "Each has been confirmed independently. The lab results, the notarized documents, the official records, they all confirm the truth. I present them here in full for the court's consideration." The reality of the situation weighed upon Robin with unbearable weight, her hands visibly trembling as she shifted in her seat. Cody's face had gone pale, the faintest tremor betraying the first cracks in his once confident exterior. Christine and Janelle exchanged glances, their faces etched with a mix of shock and sorrow. The judge's gaze rested on Cody. "Mr. Brown," he said, voice deliberate, measured, "you are aware that the evidence presented demonstrates possible criminal misrepresentation, forgery, and intentional concealment of parental rights. Do you have a statement?" He said nothing, the echo of the gavel still ringing in his ears. The courtroom held its collective breath, sensing the storm that had been decades in the making, now crashing down in fragments around him. Meri leaned forward one last time, setting her hand lightly on the top of the folder. "Your Honor," she said, voice steady, unwavering, "I have waited over 10 years for this day, not for vengeance but for the truth. The child deserves to know, and this court deserves the facts without deception. I am ready to testify fully and answer any questions regarding the evidence I present." The judge nodded slowly, the weight of the moment settling across the room like a tangible presence. "Very well," he said, "we will proceed. Mrs. Brown, your testimony will now be taken under oath, and the evidence will be examined in full. The court expects candor, clarity, and the truth." A collective shiver ran around the room. Every witness, every attorney, and every observer in the room realized the enormity of what was to come. Cody shifted uncomfortably, but the silence became his own worst enemy. Meri, unruffled and determined, prepared to deliver a testimony that would change the family, the trust, and the legacy, which had. The press had been waiting all morning, the sharp click of camera shutters slicing through the cool air like static. Questions were shouted from every direction. "Meri, is it true? Did Cody forge the papers? How did you find the evidence?" Meri didn't answer. Her attorney stayed close, shielding her from the surge of microphones, guiding her down the steps and toward the waiting car. She kept her eyes forward. The truth, once buried and dismissed, now felt impossibly loud. Inside the courthouse, Cody lingered in the empty courtroom. The noise outside was muffled here, but it pressed at the windows all the same. He sat in silence, staring at the empty chair where Meri had testified. For the first time, he looked afraid. Robin stepped quietly beside him, her heels clicking against the tile. "We have to go," she said, voice tight. Cody didn't move. "They turned on me," he muttered. "All of them, even the judge. They didn't turn on you," Robin said softly. "They just saw what was in front of them." He finally looked up, his expression a mix of anger and disbelief. "You think this is my fault," Robin hesitated, then spoke carefully. "I think you made choices, and now those choices are catching up." The silence stretched. Cody exhaled slowly, rubbing his temples. For years, control had been his comfort. The ability to talk his way through, to charm his way out. But charm didn't hold up against written proof. Outside, Meri's car pulled away from the courthouse. Her attorney looked at her from the passenger seat. "You handled yourself well there," he said. Meri nodded, staring out the window. "I've had years to practice keeping calm," she replied quietly. "But it's not over yet. That was just the beginning." The car rolled through the city, and Meri's reflection blurred in the glass, stronger now but haunted. She thought about the child at the center of it all, about what the truth meant for their future. Her heart ached, but it was steadier than it had been in years. Back at Cody and Robin's house, the tension was suffocating. The blinds were drawn, the phones silenced. On the television, a news segment played softly, replaying shots of Meri walking out of the courthouse. The anchor's voice cut through the room. What began as a quiet civil dispute has blown up into one of the most stunning revelations of the past years. The Brown case continues tomorrow with new evidence expected to surface. Cody shut off the television with a hard jab of the remote. "They're making me a villain." Robin looked at him. Her voice was soft but trembling. "Cody, you lied." He turned sharply. "I protected us. From what?" She shot back. "The truth?" The words clung in the air like smoke, heavy and unavoidable. Cody stared at her, his anger faltering. He looked down at his hands, realizing that everything he'd built, his family, his name, his control, was unraveling in front of him. Robin exhaled shakily and turned away. "Tomorrow, when court starts again, you need to tell the truth. No more trying to spin it. Just say it." Cody didn't answer. His mind was a storm of regret and fear. The walls around him, once filled with laughter and certainty, now felt like a cage. Across town, Meri sat in her small kitchen, the folders still on the table beside her. The the house was silent. She poured herself a cup of coffee and stared at the evidence again. Not because she doubted it, but because she still couldn't believe it had taken this long for anyone else to see what she had always known. The clock ticked softly for the first time in years. She felt the weight of the past starting to lift. Just a little tomorrow, she knew, it would be harder. There were still documents that hadn't been shown, names that hadn't been said aloud. And when they were, the shock that hit today would feel small compared to what was coming next. She closed the folder, whispered a quiet prayer for strength, and stood. "Tomorrow," she said under her breath, "everything changes." The morning air was cold, heavy with the kind of stillness that comes before a storm. The courthouse steps were already lined with cameras and reporters before the sun had fully risen. Their voices blended into a low hum, a chorus of speculation waiting for new pieces of truth to drop. Meri arrived early, long before the crowds grew thick. She wore the same calm expression as the day before, but her hands were clasped tightly around a thermos of coffee. Her fingers pale from the chill. Her lawyer met her at the entrance. "Are you ready for today?" he asked quietly. Meri nodded, though her jaw was tense. "I've been ready for years." Inside, the courtroom buzzed with quiet energy. The clerk shuffled papers. Reporters took their places. Every sound, the rustle of fabric, the scrape of chairs, felt amplified. Then Cody walked in. He didn't look at anyone, not even Robin. His eyes were dark, sleepless, haunted. The confidence he once carried like armor was gone. Robin followed a few steps behind, her face pale and drawn. When the judge entered, the room fell. Been manipulated for so long, forever. The gallery moved in closer. The first words of Meri's testimony were about shattering the silence, and Cody's carefully constructed world. The air in the courtroom felt heavier now, as though the very atmosphere had thickened under the weight of the truth. Meri stood tall at the witness stand, her hand still resting on the folder that had upended the entire room. Every word she spoke had landed like a hammer, and Cody sat motionless, the tremor in his hands betraying the calm he tried to maintain. The judge's gaze was fixed on her, steady and piercing. "Mrs. Brown," he said evenly, "you've presented substantial evidence, documents, verified records, and signed statements. You may proceed with your testimony." Meri nodded once, calm but resolute. "Thank you, Your Honor." She turned slightly, her voice carrying across the silent courtroom. "For years, I trusted the system that was supposed to protect our family, but trust doesn't survive in the dark. It survives in truth, and what I'm presenting today is that truth finally brought into the light." Cody shifted in his chair. The once proud man who had built his reputation on charm and authority now looked smaller, his shoulders hunched as though he were shrinking beneath the gaze of the people around him. Robin, sitting behind him, clutched her purse tightly, her expression pale and strained. Meri opened another document. "This," she said, holding it up, "is the correspondence chain between Cody and a legal intermediary who facilitated the falsified documents. The emails confirm intent. Every message aligns perfectly with the dates the original papers were filed. There is no mistake here." The judge leaned forward. "Are these communications verified?" "Yes, Your Honor," Meri replied. "They were authenticated by an independent digital forensics team. The metadata confirms the timeline." A ripple of murmurs moved through the gallery. Reporters scribbled furiously. One man in the front row muttered a quiet, "Wow," before being hushed by an officer. Cody's lawyer finally rose, trying to reclaim control. "Objection, Your Honor, these emails could have been—" "Overruled," the judge interrupted sharply. "The chain has been verified and accepted into evidence." The attorney sat down, defeated. Cody glared at him, but even that fire seemed to flicker out as quickly as it sparked. Meri continued, her tone never rising, her voice calm but commanding. "For years I was told I was imagining things, that I was bitter or confused or unable to move on. But these documents show the opposite. I wasn't imagining lies, I was living inside them." Robin looked down, her hands shaking, tears glistened in her eyes, but she didn't move to wipe them away. The gallery watched her silently, every gesture magnified by the stillness of the room. The judge turned to Cody again. "Mr. Brown," he said gravely, "you have the right to respond to these claims. Would you like to make a statement?" Cody inhaled deeply, his voice unsteady when it finally emerged. "I never wanted this," he said, eyes darting between Meri and the judge. "I made mistakes. Everyone here has. But this has gone too far." "You're twisting, Mr. Brown," the judge interrupted, voice rising slightly. "You will refrain from editorializing, speak only to the evidence." Cody's mouth snapped shut. His hands fidgeted. The silence stretched uncomfortably, thick and suffocating. Meri didn't look at him. She focused on the judge. Her voice softer now, but no less firm. "This isn't about humiliation," she said. "It's about accountability, about putting right what was wrong for too long. The truth doesn't destroy people. It exposes who they really are." The judge nodded, then turned toward the clerk. "Enter the documents into the official record. This court acknowledges the authenticity of the communications presented by Mrs. Brown." A wave of sound rippled through the room again. Murmurs, whispers, the clicking of keyboards. Cody sat rigid, staring straight ahead. His face was pale, almost ghostly. Meri closed the folder, her hand resting lightly on top of it. "That's all for now, Your Honor," she said quietly, "but the full testimony includes more, much more." The judge nodded once. "We'll reconvene tomorrow morning to continue with the next round of evidence." He banged the gavel, court adjourned. The sound echoed like a thunderclap. People from their seats, the hum of voices swelling in the background. Cody remained seated, motionless, his world cracking around him in ways he could no longer control. Meri stood, gathering her documents. She glanced at him once, not out of anger, but with the calm certainty of someone who had finally stopped running from the truth. Outside the courthouse, cameras flashed. Reporters called her name, but for the first time in years, she didn't flinch. She simply exhaled, looked up at the sky, and whispered, almost to herself, "It's just the beginning." The courthouse steps were crowded by the time Meri emerged. Into silence. "Court is now in session," he said. "We will continue with the presentation of evidence." Meri's lawyer stood. "Your Honor, we intend to introduce new exhibits, financial records, and private correspondence that further demonstrate the manipulation and concealment previously discussed." Cody's attorney shifted uncomfortably. "Objection, Your Honor. These were not part of the original filing. They were submitted within the required time frame," the judge said. "Objection overruled. Proceed." Meri stood and walked toward the witness stand again, her heels clicking softly against the floor. She carried another folder, thicker this time, its corners worn from handling. When she opened it, the first document inside caught the light. "This," she began, "is a series of financial transactions made through an account that Cody and I shared. The dates line up exactly with the falsified filings. Each withdrawal matches the payments to third-party intermediaries. These weren't random expenses. They were payments to ensure silence." Cody's jaw tightened. "That's not true," he muttered. The judge glanced at him sharply. "You'll have your turn, Mr. Brown," Meri continued. "I spent years wondering where the money went. Every time I asked, I was told I was imagining things. I stopped asking, but I never stopped looking." She turned the page and revealed printed emails, each time stamped and signed. "Here," she said quietly, "are the messages between Cody and the intermediary. He authorized the payments. The intermediary confirmed delivery of the altered documents days later." The courtroom was silent, every word absorbed like oxygen. The judge leaned forward. "These records have been verified?" "Yes, Your Honor," her lawyer confirmed. "We had them authenticated by an independent examiner." Robin closed her eyes briefly, her breathing shallow. She looked at Cody, searching his face for denial or remorse, but found neither, only exhaustion. The judge studied the papers. "Mr. Brown," he said finally, "would you like to respond to these allegations?" Cody took a deep breath, his voice unsteady when he spoke. "I didn't do this to hurt her," he said. "I was trying to protect my family. Everything I did was to keep things from falling apart." Meri's eyes met his. "You didn't protect us," she said softly. "You protected yourself." A murmur ran through the courtroom, low and sharp like a current of electricity. The judge rapped his gavel once for silence. "Enough. The evidence will speak for itself." Meri sat back down, exhaling slowly. Her lawyer placed a reassuring hand on her shoulder, but her mind was elsewhere. On the years she had doubted herself, on the lies that had filled the quiet spaces of her life. Cody stared down at the documents spread before him, his breathing shallow. Every page was another nail in the coffin of the story he had built. The judge closed the folder carefully. "We will take a short recess before reconvening for cross-examination," he said. "Court will resume in 30 minutes. He struck the gavel. The room erupted into a low murmur again. Reporters whispered furiously, their pens moving in bursts. Robin reached out, touching Cody's arm lightly. "It's over," she whispered. But Cody shook his head. "No," he said quietly. "It's not over until I say it is." There was something in his tone, something dark and unsteady, that made her pull her hand back. Meri browned from her chair, calm but weary, and walked toward the exit. She could feel eyes on her, some sympathetic, some skeptical, all curious. But she didn't flinch. The truth was finally louder than the noise around it. Outside, the clouds were gathering again, thick and gray. The air smelled like rain. Meri paused on the courthouse steps, lifting her face toward the sky. The storm hadn't broken yet, but she could feel it coming. The sky outside had turned the color of steel by the time court resumed. A faint rumble of thunder echoed in the distance, and every person inside the courtroom seemed to feel it. When the judge returned to his seat, the air fell silent again. Even the reporters had stopped whispering. The storm outside was nothing compared to the one about to break in the room. "Mrs. Brown," the judge said, "we will now hear closing statements." Meri stood calm but pale and took a slow breath. Her lawyer gave her a small nod, and she stepped forward. "Your Honor," she began, her voice steady but full of quiet emotion, "this isn't a case about numbers or paperwork. It's about trust. It's about what happens when truth is buried to protect a lie. For years I was led to believe that I was the problem, that silence was peace. But silence isn't peace. It is paralysis. The evidence shows that everything I was told to doubt was real." She looked toward Cody then, and her voice softened. "I don't hate you. I just can't carry the weight of your choices anymore." The courtroom was completely still. Even the judge looked down a moment, as if giving her words space to settle. Then, in an instant, Cody rose. His lawyer hesitated but didn't stop him. Cody was pale, his eyes rimmed with exhaustion. "I didn't mean for it to get this far," he said softly. "I wanted control. I wanted to think that if I could manage everything, nothing would fall apart. But I was wrong. I hurt people. I hurt her." Robin sat without movement, tears streaking silently down her face. Meri didn't look away. "You didn't just hurt me," she said softly. "You changed who I was, but I am taking that back now." The gavel came down once, sharp and final. "This court has reviewed the evidence extensively," he said, firm but not unkind. "The findings are clear. The documents and communications presented by Mrs. Brown are authentic. This court acknowledges deliberate concealment and falsification." Cody's eyes closed. The words landed like a physical blow. "Accordingly," the judge went on, "the falsified filings are hereby declared null and void, and the original custody and financial arrangements are reinstated. Investigation into the falsification process will continue separately. This case is hereby closed." The gavel fell again. It was over. For a long moment no one moved. Then the sounds of reality started seeping back in again. The creak of chairs, the shuffle of papers, the faint rumble of thunder rolling closer. Meri sat for a very long time, her hands clasped in her lap. Her lawyer leaned in and whispered, "You did it." She nodded slowly. "No," she said quietly. The truth did. Cody stood across the room, shoulders slumped, his world finally stripped bare. He didn't look angry anymore, just hollow, as if something essential had finally broken inside him. Robin Brown and touched his arm lightly, but he didn't respond. She looked at Meri for a long moment, her expression unreadable, something between apology and sorrow, then turned away. Meri gathered her documents, each one now marked with the weight of closure rather than proof. As she stepped outside, the first drops of rain began to fall. Cameras flashed again, but this time she didn't rush past them. She simply walked, her head high, her face calm. The rain picked up, soaking the courthouse steps, washing away the chalk lines reporters had scrawled the day before. For the first time in years, Meri didn't feel small. She didn't feel lost. She just felt free. She stopped at the edge of the sidewalk, looked up into the rain and whispered almost to herself, "Truth isn't easy, but it is always worth it." Behind her, thunder rolled one last time. The storm had finally broken, and with it, the silence.